I'd like to thank everybody for coming out tonight, especially with the turn of the weather. I think the storytelling sessions with the Land of Beginnings Festival are a real local treasure that we have here, and I'm glad to be participating in it and carrying the tradition on. I would like to introduce my guests with me tonight. This is George Spense. I've known George a few years now. He comes into the History Center, and I've already interviewed him one time on an oral history interview. He's originally from Elizabeth City, but has come to the Outer Banks for years and years as his family had cottages there. Next to him is Lib Fearing. Lib is another one that I've seen at the History Center over the years. She was even on the Outer Banks History Center Associates Board. She's not a native, but she's a long time resident, and she had several memories that she would like to share with us. And then on the far end is Ms. Maxine Peele. We have just met last week, but I feel like I've known her a long time. She was sharing stories with me when we met, and I knew a lot of the people that she was telling me about that she grew up with, and I just think that we'll have a good mix tonight. Maxine, would you like to start since you're the native?
What do you want to know?
Just tell me about growing up, what it was like growing up in Mania, where you lived, and who were your friends.
I was born and raised right here, and right behind me was Cormay Bass Knight and all of her children, and they're like family. I just grew up with them, and the whole neighborhood was loaded with children, and we played hopscotch and tag and you name it. The children don't play anymore, but we had a good childhood, and we eat each other's houses all the time, and we just had a real good time. And then of course, we weren't allowed to cross the street, you know, back in those days, and Sally would come get me sometimes, and we'd walk downtown, and we'd go back and forth, and her daddy had goats behind the house. I've never forgot that, and I used to feed those. Of course, we all had animals and stuff, and but we had a real good childhood.
George, when did you first start coming to Manio? When you came to spend the summers in Nag's Head, did you come over to Manio to get groceries and supplies and things?
I never got groceries and supplies.
You were running on the beach.
I think most of them we got in Elizabeth City and brought them down. But here again, I'm not into groceries.
What were some of what is your first memory of coming to Manio?
In Manio, I guess it really comes back to the Lost Colony. You know, if you don't mind my delving into that for a little bit, but my sister was in the first production down here
in 1937,
38, and she taught school here also. She taught Keith Fearing, and she taught Squirrely Green and several others around here, you know, names that are familiar to people. And she said, you know, she was about as old as they were, and here she was teaching them. But evidently they thought she was a good teacher. So I think that's when I first started coming over, because of the Lost Colony connection there. They bring me over to see the Lost Colony every so often. And being a kid that was fascinated with pirates and swashbuckling and all that type of thing, I immediately fell in love with Simon Fernando. I'd go home and jump up on my mother's couch or sofa in the living room, and I'd do Fernando. Oh, I was so good as Fernando in those days. Of course, I was only about that tall, I think, you know, something like that. But I really had a ball. And that was my first connection, I think, with actually coming to Manio. But I didn't buy any groceries.
Okay. Now, Liv, you were a young lady when you came. Can you tell me a little bit about what it was like moving to the area? You had a job with as a home agent, and what was Manio like then? It was after World War II. Good times, bad times?
Well, I arrived here on a Monday, June the 15th at 6 o'clock in 1947. So it was a very busy time because it was in the middle of the tourist season, and of course the tourists were the mainstay here in the summertime. So the local people didn't have much time for you. So I had a room at Edna Bell's home. Just a room, but I had my meals with her. And her house is now where UNC has their Sea Grant program, so that's where I lived until Miss Rennie Williamson got 3 apartments ready in her home, and then I moved over there into a little efficiency apartment. That house is located now right across the street from the Manuel Methodist Church. So yes, it was lively in the summer. The Lost Colony characters were walking all around, and it was a lively little place. The town at that time thrived with the tourist homes and the tourist money.
Was it easy?
Which was not a lot at that time. You know, $5 for a room in a tourist home wasn't a great deal of money, but...
Was it easy to meet people?
Not the local people because they were too busy. But yes, it was a friendly town. Very friendly.
Maxine, when do you remember learning about the Lost Colony and seeing the Lost Colony?
Well, I knew about it all my life practically because across the street, Theodore Meekins, there was people that stayed there that were in the Lost Colony. And years, went by. And, of course, I saw it. And then when I got married, I had a little girl, and Cora Twyford's little girl and her grew up together, and they wanted to be in the Lost Colony so bad that we went ahead and let them go. Mr. Long was head of the Lost Colony at that time. And they were little flower girls, so of course Cora and I went with them. And it was they had a good time, and we did too. And of course I've got friends in the Lost Colony that it's one of those things that you just don't, it's wonderful to still have the friends that were in there when I was in there. But I grew up here, and of course it was always going and coming. And
Well, when did you decide to audition, and what were the roles you played?
I was just a colonist because we had those little girls. After she got big enough that she went as a colonist, then Cora Twyford's little boy Buddy was too big to be Matty-O, so then my little boy was little Matty-O, or Mono. And I've got pictures of them, and then he got big enough. He was a colonist, so the family just grew up. And there's families that was in it. I can't help but think about George Trightwine all those years in the choir, and funny things that I will never forget. Shall I tell something funny?
Yes, ma'am.
Cora Twyford and I were like sisters, and George Trightwine kept saying, "Everybody walk across and sing." Well, we were singing. Well, all of a sudden, I missed Cora and I couldn't find her. And so when I went to look for her, she said, she was sitting backstage, she said, "I'm tired and I'm not in the choir, and I'm not walking anymore." But things went on day after day, that I stepped on Della's skirt one night and we couldn't get off of it. And it was just funny things that went on every night. And Cynthia Furr and I both fell down in the middle of the stage one night. I backed up. I knew my dress was so long, and poor Cynthia never got up. But it was just a wonderful time.
George, what were some of the first roles that you played?
Well, I started in 1948, and I started off with playing the landlord and Mark Bennett. I played Amethyst in the Amethyst and Barlow scene, several small roles like that, and that was my first year in the Lost Colony. and I auditioned to play Simon Fernando as an understudy. And luckily, I beat the guy out that I was auditioning against. So anyway, I started understudying it and then started playing it later on. And so I was in it for 5 years then. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, came back in the 70s and did 3 years then and 2 years in 2000, 2001. So I put in a few years for the Lost Colony. And the thing about it is, she said it's a great family. It really is. I made a lot of great friends through the years. I mean, a lot of years too. And I love to think back and well, I've even written several notes about some of the things that we maybe shouldn't have done. I don't know.
In the Lost Colony?
Huh?
The things that you shouldn't have done in the Lost Colony?
Well, I remember one instance. Now, I wasn't involved in this. I was on stage, and we got bombarded. This was back in the early days. They don't do that anymore, thank goodness. But in the early days, over the parapet came these bags of sand, little bags of sand, and they were exploding all around. And so, it was evidently some of the local kids having a good time out on the Lost Colony that night. But anyway, they came flying over and we were bombarded. So that's one of the stories. There are several others that some that I can't tell. One that I would like to mention, there was a character from, I think it's from Greensboro, Brantley Greason. The name should be familiar to everyone. It should go down in infamy. You'll never forget it. But anyway, he was a clown, and he was constantly getting me in trouble. We were good buddies, and we'd be walking along streets of Manio, and to prove that I was such a great person, he would say, so as our car rode by, he'd say, "Spence drinks," and get me in more trouble than, and I hadn't done a thing. And he was good like that. But the one thing that really broke me up was the fact that on stage one night, in the scene where we're saying, "Oh Lord, we save us, merciful Father," and all of this type of thing, he's right down below us. There's Bob Armstrong and myself and Elder Dare, Barbara Griffith, up there on the stage, the three of us. And we're facing the audience. And this whole group of people down below us are facing us with their backs to the audience. And right in the middle of the crowd is Brantley Greason. And he looks up and he says, these people are saying, "Save us, we're having a terrible time," I mean, not we're having a terrible time. That's what line he came up with. "We're having a terrible time." The most southern accent you ever heard in your life. I mean, talking about tearing three people up. Bob never broke on stage. I never saw Barbara break, and I never broke. But believe me, when that happened, we all turned our backs to the audience. But anyway, these are some of the things that I remember. There's several others that, as I say, I don't even want to talk about.
Okay. Lib, you had mentioned.
Someone else.
Okay, you had mentioned remembering a lot of the businesses that were in the downtown area. What was it like? What were the differences in what it's like today?
Well, we had 3 department stores, the Fearing's store, Davis's, Ben Franklin, and they were quite nice department stores, well equipped with a variety of children's things, shoes, adult women. In the Fearing building, there was a combination hardware store, electrical store, home decorating, gift shop. Did I say hardware store? I did. And they were good businesses, thriving businesses.
It must have employed a lot of people.
Yes, I would say 10, 12, something like that. Fearing's did. I'm not sure about the other ones, but all three buildings were good-sized stores. I'd like to comment on something that George said about the Lost Colony. He's right about his antics that they played on stage, because in the 50s I was involved too with the Lost Colony. We had several girls stay with us a couple of summers, as did many of the homes in town. And they would come in at night, 11:30 or what, and we'd be drinking Cokes or whatever, and they would tell of the funny incidents that happened backstage or on stage. So, George, you're on target with that story.
There
And
was some
another thing-
serious,
Another thing about the Lost Colony, I don't know whether you'll get to me about the Lost Colony or not, but none of my immediate family was in the Lost Colony, but there have been 5 generations of Fearings who have been involved with the Lost Colony. Uncle Bradford was state senator at the time, and he was instrumental in getting appropriations for the opening of the show. And then my husband's, every member of his family was in the Lost Colony, except Keith did not play a part. He had, when he was about 15 years old, he had the concession stand up there before the Lions Club had it. And then when the Lions Club took it over, of course, I worked with him and other members of the Lions Club then in the concession stand. My daughter was an usher in the Lost Colony. My both children, Malcolm and Dean, were on August 18th were baby Virginia Dayers, and my grandson was a baby Virginia Dayer this year. So we've had quite a connection with the Lost Colony too.
Maxine, were any of your children ever baby Virginia Dare?
No. No, but I do want to tell one thing. Every night in the show, Tommy Hall was old Tom. And you know the caps we had to wear, and he'd pull it down over my face every night, and I'd have to pull it back, and I got so aggravated with him. And one night we were in the chapel, and everything, they were just real noisy. It was, you know, a bunch of young people. And all of a sudden he said, "This is not the time nor the place. Cut it out now." And I thought, well, he played when he wanted to play, when it was playtime. But it really made me feel closer to him to know we were in the chapel, and he cut it off. It was not supposed to be in there. But there was just so much happened night after night up there.
But the audience was not aware of it.
Hope not. Because there was a lot of things that, you know, just really went on. That we had a good time.
there's some serious things that happened also in the Lost Colony, believe me. I mean, not just, you know, throwing sandbags over, but some kind of exciting things and also some sorrowful things. We had an accident one night out on the highway on the way to the Lost Colony, and there were about 5 or 6 members of the Lost Colony in the car, and several of them were killed in that crash. And that's something you don't want to, you know, you can't forget it, believe me.
And then there was a fire in 47
And
also,
that's right,
wasn't there?
exactly. And then also, you know, the night the criminals hid under the women's dressing room, and they were captured by, I think it was Skipper Bell, with the flare gun.
Well, the Lost Colony has been great for Manio and Roanoke Island, because it certainly filled the tourist homes. And a lot of the people who visited in the tourist homes became longtime friends too. I know Paul Green and his wife stayed with the Fearings when they would come down here at the tourist home. You just met friends that way that have lasted through the years.
One night
That was the case with us.
One night I was sitting in the dressing room, and like always, I was usually late getting there. And Bob and Andy and everybody in the room were all sitting down, putting their makeup on. They had their costumes on, and here I come in late. And I start stripping down to get into my costume. I'm standing there in my underwear, and all of a sudden, in front of me, right in front of me, the most beautiful blonde face appeared. And it was Eva Marie Saint, the actress. She and her husband had come down to see the show, to see Bob. They were good friends of his. And she caught me in the most embarrassing position I think I've been in a long time. But I mean, you know, that's another name you can't forget. But there were some exciting things like that.
We've got a picture up real quick of the Manio fire in 1939. Maxine, you said that you had remembered that.
I remember, like I say, my mother took my sister and I down to my grandmother's because it was further away from the fire. And I remember it was the noise and the black smoke. And I remember that, but you know, I don't remember what it looked like afterwards because I weren't but 5. And but it was frightening.
Well, we've had several serious fires in
Yeah.
Manio, even before there was a volunteer fire department.
Yeah, because then like we said before, the old hotel and all that
The
burned.
waterfront.
Yeah. And
And they used the bucket brigade. Do you remember that?
no, but I remember going down there before it all burned, and there was Tarkenton's grocery store, and Owens had a little restaurant that they would pass hot dogs out of a little window, and then there was all those fish houses, and then there was the Bonners, but before Bonners it was, I forgot what his name was. It was Doris's father's, I think. And
J.
then,
Jones.
and then Daddy's little barber shop. And then there was Davis's. And then the old hotel. And I remember
The waterfront was pretty well
Yep.
destroyed.
it was so different, I can tell you, than what it is now.
Now, before y'all came up on stage, you were talking about another fire in 1965 when Davis burned. Do y'all
Yeah.
remember that one?
I do, because my husband had his boat, and I think Porky's was down there too, but they left home, and I took my 2 children, and it was scary because we didn't know. They were I think they had to turn some of the boats loose, hoping they would float away. And it was bad.
Most of it seemed to be on the waterfront. That's kind of unusual rather than back in the residential section.
Uh-huh.
Well, I think there was a lot of, in the early fire, there were a lot of gas and oil
Oh, yeah, on the waterfront. Yeah,
tanks
there
on the
was.
waterfront, and everything was wooden. Now, Fearing's burned not too long ago in the grand scheme of things.
In the early 80s, I think. That was a big fire, too. Of course, we had a volunteer fire department at that time. But the whole area in there between the theater and
Endless Possibilities.
Endless Possibilities, yeah. That was part of Fearing's Incorporated. And the funny thing, the interesting thing about that, the next morning when we went down to examine the ruins, I mean, we were there during the fire, but when we were examining the ruins, the cash register that Uncle Woodson always stood behind was still there. And we opened it, and there were 2 wedding bands that were in the cash register drawer. And I'm the proud owner of those. I don't know whether they were for sale or they were someone's. But they lived through that fire.
George, I'd like to ask you a little bit about what the beach was like. We've heard a lot about Roanoke Island and Manio. What was Nags Head like when you were younger? A lot younger.
My first memory, first thing I can remember about anything, I guess, was looking down a long hall with light at the other end, big tunnel. And I was evidently in my father's arms, and I saw this light. I couldn't, and there was this lump in the floor of this hall. It just went along, and there was a big lump like that. And I wondered about it for years, and I asked my sister, can you tell me what that was? And it was our cottage. It was sitting on the ground, and evidently sitting on a stump, and the stump had raised the floor up, and that was our cottage, following one of the hurricanes. So my father rebuilt the thing, put it back up, and we lived in it for many years. And it had a wraparound porch and very interesting house. My stories about it are, well, first of all, my father, as I grew a little bit older, he got me a rowboat because I loved boats and I wanted one so bad. And he bought me this beautiful rowboat that someone had built down here, and it was nice. But he played a trick on me because he didn't trust me. I don't know why, but he didn't. He got this long rope that stretched from here to the wall over there, and he tied this huge 50-pound weight on one end of it. Tied the other end to the rowboat and gave me some oars, and he said, okay, row. So I rowed around in a circle for about 3 or 4 years in my backyard. Our backyard was water. It was, the cottage was sitting right on the edge of the water. So I rode around in circles for years thinking, hey, this is great. But I couldn't figure out how to go anywhere. So finally I got strength enough to lift that weight and got it in the boat, and I took off. And they haven't seen me since. but anyway, that's the rowboat story. And there are several others.
Ladies, did y'all ever go over to the beach in the earlier days? Did you ever go over to the casino?
The casino, everybody went to the casino. Do you remember good nights over there? I remember some good hot nights.
I remember going to the beach when I was a child. Daddy, there was nothing over there. And Daddy would take his radio, somebody over there that was in a Coast Guard station fixed radios. And there weren't anything over there, was there, George, when we were children? Well, hardly any houses.
Well, there was enough over there for me. The casino was there, believe me. The hurricane took our cottage, one on the sound side, for the last time in 44 and completely dismantled it. I mean, it blew it apart. So my father bought a house over on the beach, and it was directly across from the parking lot between the casino and the bingo stand, right across the street from that parking lot, which made it easy for me to leave the casino at night and go home without arousing any suspicion. Didn't wake my parents up. But I worked in the casino for 2 years. When I was, I guess in high school or college, I was in charge of a bowling alley, and I found out one thing. That is the greatest way to meet girls you'll ever find. And I met a lot of them. And I really did. So I worked there and for a couple of years, and as a matter of fact, Ras would even loan me his car rather, to take my date home at night. So I enjoyed the casino very much.
It was in its heydays, too, in the 40s, I think.
Pardon?
It was in its heydays in the 40s with the big bands.
Mm-hmm.
And if you ever went over there on a Saturday night, when Teresa Beasley from One Cheese and John Thomas Davis danced, everybody gave them the floor. It
That's
was
right.
quite a spectacle. They were.
It's amazing. Mm-hmm. It's amazing.
Yeah. Everybody danced barefooted.
That place would be packed with people.
Exactly.
But they'd all part, and this couple would dance their heads off. I've never seen anything like it in my life. And I don't think either one of them had any dancing lessons.
Of course not.
That's what
But
I was
Not in
going to
those
ask.
years.
They were amazing.
Where did they pick it up?
I don't know,
It
but they
just
were really
comes
great.
natural, the way they did it. They were both very active. I had
They
the
were
privilege of
fantastic.
dancing with John Thomas one time.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah, we had a good time.
That's They call jitterbug.
Yeah.
I remember.
One thing I do have to mention, because my wife will remind me of it if I don't. Over on the sound side, when I lived over there first as a very young child, we had this huge post office over there that was the Hollowell building. And it was very, very large and very interesting, two-story building with porch around the upstairs, so rooms opening up of it. And so my mother and father would send me for the mail every day. And I loved to go to the post office and get the mail and bring it home. I felt very important doing that. And I kept wondering, why is it I'm having to walk further each day to get the mail? And that really rocked my brain for a long time. And then all of a sudden, I found out they were moving the post office. They had the thing on rollers, big log rollers, and they moved that thing all the way around Engagement Hill and put it over on the beach road. And it stayed over on the beach road for a number of years until it was demolished for some reason. But I mean, that was the longest walk, and it kept getting longer every day.
Well, in addition to the casino, what were some other activities that young people like to do?
Oh, the Shrine Club. The Lost Colony Shrine Club. That was part that you haven't mentioned
Yeah.
yet, George, about the Lost
what?
Colony. The Shrine Club on Saturday nights after the Lost
Oh,
Colony.
yeah.
You'd go over there about 11:30,
Over
and
the
it was
Shrine
great, great, great show.
Fantastic.
The Shrine Club is located,
Is
was
that-
located where the Catholic Church there is at the
Yeah.
junction going to the Hatteras.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was big time.
Andy and Barbara both were involved in that a lot. Barbara especially.
Yeah, and this is in the late 40s.
Yeah. But it was those shows you could not
They
beat.
were excellent,
Yeah.
excellent.
Um,
And of course, there was dancing there, and, to 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, so there was plenty to do here. There was
Yeah.
plenty to do here.
Weren't people tired after the show, or did they have a
No,
lot of
no.
adrenaline?
The people in Lost Colony were all fired up and ready to go. And their day was just beginning, the way I remember.
Maxine, do you ever remember going over to the shows on the beach? I think maybe sometimes the beach club had them too.
Well,
They did.
the casino used to have good music when I was growing, younger, different bands. And I've been to the Shrine Club too.
Did your mother know?
Yeah, now Mama knew that, but I was older then.
Can I ask how you met your husband?
Well, he's from Hatteras, and I don't know how I met him, but I just met him. And we'll soon be married 58 years, so.
Well, I was honored to meet him the other day, and he was mentioned several times that he had not seen the Lost Colony.
No, because he had a party boat. And my little girl, when she was in it, Wesley was just a little boy, and my mother-in-law would keep him until he got home and eat. Then he would go pick Wesley up and then put him to bed at night. And that's the way we did until he got big enough that he was in the show. So he never could make it.
Yeah.
Do you have any more of those adult-rated stories about the Lost Colony?
Yeah, well, no. Well, yeah, I've got 2 or 3. Well, Actually, I could tell about the suitcase.
What suitcase?
Well, this goes back to Nag's Head and also ties in with the Lost Colony, so I might as well spill the beans and really get myself in trouble. I knew I was going to have to do this tonight somewhere or other. But anyway, this friend of mine, Sam Green, played Father Martin in the show. And as I said, I was doing Fernando. And in the summertime, my mother would usually give me permission to use the cottage for a week to bring down some of my buddies and have a house party. You know how those are. So Sam and I and two friends from Elizabeth City, were in the cottage. And for 2 or 3 years there, I don't know why, but the ABC people would have conventions at the casino. And as you might remember, there was a long bar set up in the upstairs of the front of the casino, right in front of Rass's office, as a matter of fact. And the people would come up there and they'd have a party and have all of their people up there dancing and so on. And they would display all of their products along that bar. You would see on this long bar that ran about the length of the stage, you'd see bottle after bottle after bottle after bottle of every brand, make, and whatever that you can imagine. And as I said, Greason always said, he drinks. A little bit. Not a lot. But anyway, Sam and I and the two guys from Elizabeth City decided we need to go over there. And they thought Sam and I were stars. Big thing, because we're in the Lost Colony. Come right on up and make yourself at home. Grab a drink from the bar. So we did. We grabbed one bottle here, one bottle there, one bottle here, one bottle there. We went back to the house and filled up a whole suitcase full of booze. Lasted in the entire summer, I knew I was going to get in trouble.
I think that we're going to take some audience questions in a little bit, but before we do that, I'd just like to ask if there's any final thoughts you have on spending so much time here and what that's meant, and also, what you think some of the biggest changes for the good or for the bad are. Maxine, would you like to start with that?
I don't really know what to tell you. I know everything is completely changed because everything was really quiet when, I was growing up. Now there's a lot of traffic because there's a lot of people. But I don't really know what to say.
What were some of your favorite things about growing up here?
Well, the people, we were like family. When children, we were just more family. Everybody was family. I grew up, Margie's brother, Sam Jr., we were all there together. And we were always playing and doing something, but the whole neighborhood was full of children, and it was quiet, but, it was wonderful, really.
Liv?
Well, you've heard people say we never locked doors or cars during those days. The house was never locked. You just didn't think, as Maxine said, it was just kind of like one big family. I know when I first came down here, I had an occasion to meet Delno Burris. And Delno was the ticket person upstairs at the casino, too. But and she worked at the health department. And I hadn't been down here too long, and for what reason, she said, now just let me tell you something, nobody's down here is better than anybody else. And I think that's the way the residents really felt down here at that particular time. And another big change is so many new people have moved in. We don't know them like like our little small community used to be, where you knew your neighbors and had time for visits and that.
When I was growing up, we didn't even have sidewalks. Did they have sidewalks when you came?
I think there were 3 streets paved.
Well, we didn't.
And the street I lived on was paved, which was Sir Walter.
Well,
Yeah.
well, ours was not, and we didn't have sidewalks. And I thought Mother was going to kill me. A friend of mine, when they got a sidewalk up to the porch, we went in her garden and pulled up little collards and set them on each side of the sidewalk instead of flowers. We had a good time.
Your mother had a wonderful garden.
Mother had a huge garden, and other people had put flowers, so Janet and I planted collards. We had a good time.
That's still a pretty plan.
But we did, I mean, this was just children, and we really enjoyed ourselves. And
the town actually was small enough that you could go 2 or 3 blocks over and be safe, and just tell Mom where you were going. Of course, I wasn't here during that time, but I've heard that that's the way it was. Of course, we renamed the street, too, in the mid-'80s, I think. We had streets like First Avenue and Water Street and County Street and Highway Street were the names, some of them, when I first came down
What
here.
was Budley Street? I've always wondered. Was there ever a Main Street?
I have a cheat note. I was hoping you were going to ask that. Sir Walter Raleigh was County Street. Budley Street, as we know it, was either Highway or Lodge Street, they called it. Ananias Dare was the main street. And Queen Anne's was Water Street. Devon was Broad Street. Agona was First Avenue. And San Fernando was Bay Street. And they're just a few of them, so that's how the names were. And they changed the names to fit in with Lost Colony names prior to the 400th celebration.
Now, you took part in that too, didn't you?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Do you want to hear a little bit about that?
Yes, please.
Okay. I was involved with the Women's Club at that time, and LeBom had been doing some high school workshops about the early settlement on Roanoke Island. So when the 400th was coming up, she asked me if I would our Women's Club be interested in doing anything for the celebration? Well, what do you have in mind? And she said making period costumes of the time, and you would kind of be the court for John Brooklittle when he came over, who was one of the kings of arms for England. And so we did, about 8 or 10 of us made costumes to wear. And I made mine out of a pair of drapes, and there were Christine Smith was one, but anyway, as a result of that, we toured. About 3 of us toured the state of North Carolina, giving a short drama of the beginning of the Lost Colony and explaining how the dresses were made, the pieces and the customs, and the food that was eaten at that time. So that grew out of the 400th.
And from what I've learned from talking to people that were involved with that, it was a big deal. Everybody focusing on Manio and trying to get the attention drummed up.
Well, the
for
press
the
didn't help
400th.
any out on that particular thing, because they said if all those people show up, the island's going to sink. So there was not the numbers there that we had hoped to be. But anyway, it was a nice day.
It was, as we mentioned earlier, the Lost Colony really brought about a family affair to the people that worked in the Lost Colony. And also the citizens of Manio, you couldn't beat them. I mean, they were always behind us, always helping us, and it was great. It really was.
George,
Matter
it
of fact-
wasn't anything unusual to go in Fearing's drugstore and see 3 or 4 of the Lost Colony players there, even Andy, Barbara, and a lot of the
Right.
leading characters of the Lost Colony
Yeah.
there for lunch.
Yeah, several of us lived right together in this little complex. I don't know, what's the street behind the police department now? What's the name of that?
And a nice day.
Ananias on Ananias Street. There were several of us that lived in a house there.
There was a Drinkwater house that was open.
No, well, on this side of the Drinkwater house, there was the small house Andy and Barbara lived in. The one next to it, Sam and Bob and I lived in.
The Peterstone, one of their
Pardon?
Peterstone house,
Yeah,
diagonally across from Drinkwater's.
no, I'm sorry.
Well,
Just up a
I'm
little bit,
not following you.
but just towards the waterfront. But anyway, it was a great group. And as a matter of fact, my father used to be a lawyer in Elizabeth City and was in court down here a lot and so on. And Chief Mitchell, who was a legendary figure around here, believe me, knew my father real well. And my father had a stroke, and Chief Mitchell had one. My father told Chief Mitchell to keep it up, don't give up, just keep, working away. So every time I'd walk down the street and I'd bump into Chief Mitchell, first of all, he'd come like this, boom, and clobber me in the arm. That was his way of saying hello to me, tell your father hi, But it was a great group. It really was. It was wonderful.
When I first came down here in 47, we only had one policeman, and that was Chief Mitchell. And he was the father of Doris Walker, who had Walker's Diner in those years, which is now 108 Budley.
Anyway, we could talk all night about this.
All right, well, I'm going to see if there's any questions. Does anybody have any questions in the audience?
I could tell them about the stab story.
I'd like to hear a little bit about some of the big storms. What are some of the worst storm experiences you guys had?
Some of the big storms, well, they destroyed my house several times. During the 33 storm, there used to be a house over on the beach that was sitting back from the Sound, pretty far back from the Sound, and it had all of the names of the ships that had been sunk in the area plastered on the side of the cottages. That was up high. It became the Fearing Cottage later on. They brought it, and it was up high, and it was a perfect place to go for a hurricane. So everybody in that area, when there was a storm coming, we'd rush over to that house because, as I said, it was back from the water, and it was up high, and it had weathered many a storm. That was the hurricane for 33. The 44 hurricane wiped out our house completely. The Ash Wednesday storm took care of the one that we finally bought following the 44 storm over on the beach. That took care of that one. We rebuilt that. We've rebuilt a lot of cottages because of storms, let's put it that way.
Mania woke up the morning of the Ash Wednesday storm, and we didn't know that there was any storm around. That was when they had the big overwash in the Sound over there. And then in the 60s, I think, water came up to the Fearing drugstore about 3 or 4 feet, up to the counter, the lunch counter. So that was that particular storm in the 60s. I don't remember the name. Refrigerators turned over on their sides and everything.
Was it Ash
completely-
Wednesday or was it Donna?
It was not Ash Wednesday, because Ash Wednesday did not affect
Well, in
Roanoke
Ash
Island.
Wednesday,
Donna.
in Ash Wednesday, I was living with my husband's, we were living with her, And the helicopters would come in and put people out over at the school.
On the Ash
Because it was,
Museum.
it was so bad on the beach. And I remember that.
George, you mentioned the Fearing Cottage over there. That was a Fearing group from Elizabeth City. And those boat names that were on that cottage now have been replicated, and they're on a building downtown in Manio. The building where the old Planters Bank was. And the building, well, that was originally the
Bank of
Fearing's
Manio,
restaurant, the Fearing restaurant, and the Fearings added to it. And upstairs on the second story, a number of those old boat names have been replicated, and if you look up and see them.
Well, the worst storm I ever saw, we had just moved in our house in 60, and we were on the Doe's Creek. And Ab Westcott, bless his heart, said, "Now you be careful, you're going to get water. It'll be so clean when it all gets through all this water." And the tide had never been up there. Well, Rudolph had to go save his boat, so it left just me and my little girl up there. And when the tide began to come up, it came in my house. And I was fit to be tied, and I shall never
Didn't
forget.
clean it out, did it?
I didn't have anything on but some plissé, I think it's what you call it, real thin pajamas. I didn't care. And there was a couple came up there, Nevin Westcott, and somebody came to pick me up, and I took off in my pajamas, and he said, "I think you better put a house coat on." I grabbed my little girl, and I was ready to leave. And Rudolph's mother was waiting for us down in Miss Jeannie's yard with water up to here.
Well, the other stories too. We used to have hurricane parties while we were waiting. I expect some of y'all remember those hurricane parties. I know my family was in the utility business, so my husband and the family were out taking care of the electrical wires and that kind of thing. So we had some good times during the hurricanes as well as clean-up times.
That one were a good one.
So, we had hurricane parties whether they struck or not.
Does anyone else have a question?
George, tell them about when after a storm, and you and your mother and your family came back and there was wire all around the bottom of the house, and what y'all found.
You mean the Ash Wednesday storm?
Well, whichever one.
Yeah, okay. Well, as I said, the Ash Wednesday storm, this was the house over on the beach, on the ocean side, and sat right across from the casino, as I said. And the Ash Wednesday storm took some pilings from piers and decided to shove them under our house, or in our house. Anyway, it knocked down our house, put it on the ground. Those pilings went through and took out my bedroom and the one next to it downstairs, just slammed right on through the side of the house. And the whole house was sitting down there on the ground. And I'll never forget the look on my mother's face as long as I live when she came down and saw it. We opened the door, front door as best we could, and there was sand in that place that was about this high. And over in the corner was, you ladies know what this means. I'm knick-knack. You know, it's the whole little thing, the whole vases and so on. You know, anyway, it sat in the corner, and it had a vase up on just a little tiny vase up on top of it with this artificial flower in it. Well, all of this sand in that house, it had been knocked down on the ground off the pilings. Water had gone through it, and everything else had happened. And that little plant thing was still there, sitting on that little thing right in the corner of the room. I don't know how God managed it, but he sure pulled a good one there. I mean, it was really, I don't know how it happened. But the look on my mother's face was something I'll never forget. She couldn't believe it is torn to pieces. But we rebuilt it again. But that's about the worst hurricane that I can remember, ash winds and storm.
But we've survived them all,
Oh, yeah.
so
always do.
that's a good thing. We never leave.
Yeah.
Linda?
Sarah, I have a question for George. A lot of you probably do not know this, but George was our first emergency management director and in charge of ambulances in Dare County. And did a really good job as director of that department. Have you got any kind of a funny story that you can tell about the ambulances?
By the ambulances? Well, it involves me, and it probably is maybe too rough to tell in this mixed group. But as I said, I'll get into trouble anyway, so I might as well tell it. We were on our ambulance run one night to Elizabeth City, and this was in the days when we had the smaller ambulances, not like the trucks they have now. And I happened to be in the back with this lady that was an alcoholic. And we had picked her up somewhere, and we're going to take her up to Elizabeth City to Albemarle to do whatever they do with recovering alcoholics. Anyway, she had to go to the restroom. So here I am in the back, and there's a man up front driving. He's not doing me any good either. So I just passed through a bedpan, and I said, please use this. Turned and looked away, and she did her business. So we came to a stop, and there was a car right behind us, and the lights were shining in the back of the ambulance. I could see that. And so we were stopped for the Cornjock Bridge. This was when they had a bridge there instead of what they have now. But the thing was open, wide open, and the car was stopped there, the ambulance was stopped there waiting for it to close so we could get on our way. Well, I didn't want to carry that thing all the way to Elizabeth City with me. So I just opened the back door and threw it out. All over the hood of that little sports car. I mean, that man was a little upset with me. But by that time, the bridge closed and we took off. I really upset my apple cart tonight. I swore that I was going to be nice.
Do we have any other questions from the audience? Don't be shy.
Question about the casino that has been kind of tossed around, but I just wondered firsthand. We know that there were black performers that came to the casino, but I wondered if local black people were allowed to go there before,
I can't hear.
Don't know about that.
Did local black folks patronize the casino?
Pardon?
Did local black people patronize the casino?
Local black people? Not then.
Mm-mm.
Oh. No.
Actually, there were places established. One was on the Soundside Road and was owned by one benefactor of the Outer Banks History Center that was a gathering spot. And there was also one up in Bias Shores.
There was
But-
also one on North Column.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Where?
In the neighborhood, going out to the jail in that neighborhood there. And then there was another one out on County Street too, very small, kind of private. No, I wasn't calling names.
I got one story about the Lost Colony I've got to tell.
Okay.
Bob Armstrong, if you know him, was a very tall actor, very tall, very big. and he played John Borden, of course, and we had to fight every night. So I'd attack him. He's standing up on the table, and I'd attack him with my knife. Well, he couldn't see. He was blind as a bat. And so every night we miss each other. So I said, Bob, let's try something different. You come up first with your hand like that and keep your thumb out like that, and I'll come right between it, and you can grab my wrist. That's a good idea. We'll try that. So I held he held his hand out, and I went like that. I hit his thumb and bent it all the way back to here. Another night, he also, as I said, had played football in college and all that type of thing. He had a bad knee, just as I have. So we were supposed to carry the fight down to the stage, and we were wrestling around on the stage. And all of a sudden he says, my knee's out, I can't get up. And we're fighting and tussling and throwing each other around. And so I said, well, just keep it up. I kept battling like I was fighting him. And so I took the knife and started stabbing. And by that time he turned and put a big scar right down his back. He still has it.
How was his knee? How did he get off the stage?
Oh, he got
with
it
his
back
knee?
in. He got it back in and got up.
Live theater.
That was the less important part. Was it?
Are there any more questions?
So where do they go, where do they go for medical, like to have babies?
Where?
When?
What kind of medical care, what kind of doctors were there?
Well, we most always, well, in the early years, there were only one, but in my time down here since 47, we've most always had a doctor, but there was a period of time that we did not have one, and my husband was very instrumental, being a pharmacist, in searching for a doctor. At one time, Dr. Harvey was brought down here, he and his family, and then Dr. Holton was brought down here through the efforts of Keith. And when I first came down here, Dr. Johnson was
Dr.
delivering
Johnson.
babies.
He's the only
And,
one that was here,
Her
was ill.
mother-in-law was
a midwife.
a midwife, yeah, for Dr. Johnson in her home.
As a matter of fact, I was born in the home that I grew up in. Dr. Johnson delivered me, and I think there was some woman, of course, Miss Ada Rudolph's mother was not here at that time.
Yeah, she was here in 47,
Uh-huh.
yeah, when I was here.
But she worked with Dr. Harvey for a long time.
Dr. Johnson was, as I recall, the only person down here, only doctor down here for years and years
Yeah,
and
he
years.
was.
I've got
Yeah,
a
but-
long story about him, but I won't tell it because it's too long.
Well, that's how the Fearing family came down here, was a doctor in the late 80s, Dr. Woodson Bradford Fearing. And he would call on people on horseback or cart. The mode of transportation was at that time. Sometimes he had to spend the night if he went as far as Stumpy Point. And so I know they had one back as far back as the late 80s. But we've always had fairly good medical service.
Yes?
Can you tell me anything about the Tranquil House?
The Tranquil House?
Before.
The Tranquil House.
Tranquil House? Yeah, my first summer down here was, I think, the last time I even remember it being used. But anyway, the Lost Colony had several of the people of the Lost Colony evidently lived there or whatever. But anyway, had a big cocktail party up on the porch. And I'll never forget that as long. That was my first summer here. Very nice party. Interesting house.
They say that Wilbur and Orville Wright stayed there in the Tranquil House.
Well, when I was growing up, Daddy's barber shop was right across from the Tranquil House, and it belonged to the Goulds.
That's right. And then the Fearings bought it from the Goulds. And my husband and I had our own jobs and operating the Fort Raleigh Hotel, which is now an administrative building. And we would spend the night, take care of the night tourists in the Tranquil House. Of course, there was no air conditioning.
When did the Goulds sell it?
What?
The Goulds, when did they sell the Tranquil House?
It must have been in the 50s sometimes, or the late 40s, because I think it was before my children were born that we operated it.
And somebody had asked me when the Manio Post Office was built, built where the Tranquil House was, and I didn't
Exactly.
have a good date on that.
Well, the Tranquil House stayed unused for a number of years. The post office on the corner there must have been in the 80s, I would say.
Tranquil House was right there where the
Magnolia Grill is now.
Huh?
Magnolia Market.
the wooden building with all the little shops and so on.
On the corner
Right
there.
there on the corner, yeah.
And when you came, it was on our street, wasn't it?
The post
The
office,
post
yes, it
office.
was, and that building is
Uh-huh.
still there.
Still there.
Yeah, that brick building on the corner there across from Ortega's Restaurant. I think either Charlie Evans or Victor Meekins was postmaster when I first came here. I don't remember where, Charlie.
I think it was. Mr. Kreider worked there. I
Yeah.
remember him.
There's some things in town that really haven't changed too much, and some things have been replaced. So it's been interesting to watch it grow and develop.
You'll have to come by and take a look at all these pictures that are running by. There's one of the old post office and Manio Furniture, and
Yeah,
it's
it
same
was
old
across
brick
the street
buildings.
from Manio Furniture. Yeah. And we had a bus system here too, when I came down here in 47, the
That's
Virginia
what?
Dare bus system, the Virginia Dare Transportation Company. And I think it left a couple of times a day, early in the morning, then late at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And that's how a lot of our mail came in after the mail boats no longer existed. And that post office the bus station was located where Manio Furniture Company is now, and across from the old hotel.
Remember that too.
Yep. It was a means of transportation for a lot of people down here at that
I know.
time because cars were not as
I know, we used to
Is
come
that my
back.
wife?
familiar then.
Yes.
Hi.
Well, she's got a question.
Do any of you remember much about the World War II years when there were blackouts, the colony wasn't?
Maxine May,
I
that was
remember.
before my time.
Did you
Mother,
ever see anything about the German U-boats?
Mother had curtains, and there was no
There were
street
blackouts.
lights,
There were blackouts.
and it was dark. And
I've heard them say they could see flames from in the ocean there off Nag's Head. But there definitely was blackouts here, and I think that's the first time that the light at the Wilbur Wright Memorial has ever been cut off. They were not shining at that time.
Someone back there.
Yeah, Kaylee?
Yeah, when you were talking about the bus service, was it just like up to the city effect?
Norfolk, Elizabeth City. Mose Bass Knight and Sam Midget were drivers. Yeah, and the Quiddly, right.
So was there any transportation west?
Not that I recall. There were two ferries going west. That was transportation.
Where Pirates Cove is sitting today, who built that
I'm sorry.
The Drafty Tavern, who built it?
Who built?
I don't remember who built that.
Who built what?
The Drafty Tavern.
Drafty Tavern.
I don't remember who operated it.
The
but it's
Drafty
a-
Tavern?
Yes, sir.
That was, I don't
Oh,
know.
man,
recall
that's
who
been a
built
long
that.
time back, too.
Yeah.
I've heard it was moved. It was if you've been watching these pictures, there was a picture of the Midway intersection, and there was a building there. That was the Drafty Tavern, but I've heard it was built in Mans Harbor and barged over.
Well, there was one down near where, closer to where the bridge is at one time. That's the one I remember. The
You never
Drafty-
went in there, did
Well, I heard
you?
about it.
I think this gentleman had a question, I believe.
Yes, sir.
There was also a bus service to Hatteras Island.
You're right. The Midget Brothers. Midget Brothers. I rode on that bus many times.
Going across that bridge was something scary, I'll tell you. It's a two person.
Well, you should have been there when we crossed the ferry. On the sand, on Sandy Beach or inland in the sand ruts before the road was paved.
Talking about the one going to Mania. It was like you were hanging over the side on that bus, the old bridge.
The Roanoke Sound Bridge.
Oh, okay, yeah. The Midget Brothers from Hatteras operated that bus. I remember my first bus trip on that, too. Do you have time for that?
I do.
Back in '47, I was dressed up all in a pretty yellow thing and my hair all in place and ready to go down on the bus. And I think it was the mail bus then, was a member of your family driving the mail bus? Rudolph drove the mail
I
bus.
think yes, he did, because I've
Okay.
heard him speak about
Yeah.
stopping in different places.
Well, I was going down there in connection with my work, and first time on this mail bus, not the passenger bus. And Rudolph had, I think, his cousins or his sister or his aunts or somebody on the bus that day going to Hatteras. So my place was in the back of the mail truck. And when we got about a mile below Jeanette's Pier, the pavement stopped, and the yellow flies swarmed in. So and I mean yellow flies, lots of them. So I protected myself with putting the mail bags all up around me just like this. I'll never forget that day. So there were two different ways to get down to Hatteras Island, with the midgets and with Rudolph on the mail bus.
Kaylee?
How about holidays? How holidays were celebrated both in your individual families and then as a community?
How are holidays celebrated individually and as a community? Individual families and as a community.
About the way they are now. I mean, a holiday Easter's Easter, except everybody got dressed up for Easter, didn't they,
That's
Maxine?
right.
Yeah.
On Easter, everybody had
Yeah.
new clothes.
Yeah.
Did you wear gloves and hats?
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes. Children did, too. And we had sunrises then. I mean, that's for Christmas, same tradition. And
All right, well, if there's no more questions, I want to wrap it up. Carl's got me on a tight schedule, so we can get this ready for the television stations. But I would like to thank each of you so much for coming out and sharing all this with me, and for the audience. You've been absolutely wonderful, and I appreciate it very much.
it's been a pleasure.